Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Executive Encore. This is the podcast where accomplished women discover their chapter of purposeful impact, their next chapter. I'm your host, Patricia Muir, and today we're going to explore something that sits at the very heart of successful transition: the power of your story. Whether you're launching your own venture or taking on a leadership role in your Executive Encore, or something that truly matters to you, a different path, the way you tell your story can transform not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome someone who understands this more than anyone. Eritrea is a Telly Award-winning story producer, former journalist, and a visionary founder of Story Maestra or Maestra. With over 15 years of experience crafting compelling narratives for global leaders and cultural icons, powerhouse brands, she's mastered the art of turning experiences into influence. But that's not what makes her work especially relevant for our community. She now dedicates her experience to helping high achieving women reclaim their voice through their signature experience, the story shift, through her signature experience of the story shift. She understands that our decades of leadership, wisdom, and impact deserve to be shared in a way that opens doors and creates meaningful connections. The opening line of her website, if you visit, is "Break free from the stories that hold you back, the story guidance for women who've lost themselves in the corporate world." Eritrea, welcome to Executive Encore. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, Patricia, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hmm. Now, let's start off right away with something that I know resonates deeply with our listeners. Many women in our community have spent decades building impressive careers, leading teams, and creating impact. Yet, when it comes to talking about themselves and their value, they often struggle. How do you see storytelling transforming their personal and professional branding?
You know, the most dangerous story isn't the story that someone tells about you. It's the outdated one you keep telling yourself,
Oh, okay.
right?
The outdated one. Tell me
Mhm.
more about that.
Yeah, what's really incredible about, high achieving, high performing women is that they sort of built their careers, on being credible, on being capable, right? They fill in like this little checklist of all the things that you're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And what I realized is that their story sort of becomes this performance, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And it's more so about these external idea of what people see about this person, about see about you, but not really aligning with who you are. So then what happens is you start outgrowing the story that made you successful, right? And you start feeling stuck, you start feeling misaligned, and for many, invisible.
Mm, mhm. I know many women talk to me about the feeling of being invisible
Yeah.
when I really don't see that it's true. Like the women that I know, they're not invisible,
Yeah.
but they have that creeping sense that they are becoming invisible. So that's fascinating. Can you walk us through what you mean by the difference between sharing the facts about our careers? You've talked a little bit about it, but how is it different from telling a story? I would imagine many of our listeners have great resumes, many pages long, but they're not quite sure how to turn that into a compelling narrative.
Yeah, here's what I've learned about working in like 15 years of producing stories, for many people is that, your resume gets you into the room, but the story what keeps the room listening, right? So
Mhm.
oftentimes the person is talking about, look, I've accomplished this, I graduated this, everything's all by based on these metrics of like
Yeah.
what it means to be successful, right? But like
Mhm.
oftentimes it's that story that often you feel that you kind of view it as shame, a story about you that perhaps you had to use that in order to fight to get where you're going, right? But
Hmm.
you're often using that idea, what that story, that experience is really holding you back because your view of that story is like a baggage, right? But
Mhm.
it's always living there, right? And oftentimes many people use their journey in life to overcome something,
Mhm.
right? And it serves you. I mean, oftentimes we've all experienced certain things in our lives that made us become stronger,
Mhm.
right? Or it made us fight even further, right? Or maybe we saw our parents struggle. We're like, I don't want to struggle anymore, right? And so you start pursuing these like pursuits,
Mhm.
right? But what is a story that you have been afraid to claim? What is the story about that you've experienced that you've put in the corner somewhere because you're afraid of how people are going to receive it? You
Hmm.
also may be afraid of like what that says about you. But everything that you've experienced has brought you into this moment. So my point is really is like everything that you have experienced, the things that you kind of are hiding behind, let's use that. Let's reclaim that and use that as a source of power, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that is really what I mean about what is a story that you're telling about yourself, because you can talk about your checklist of all the things that you accomplished, but what are the things that you are afraid to people to know about you, about who you are? And people often are afraid to do that.
You made me think of, we've gone through certain eras of listening to speakers, motivational speakers, right? And like you
Mm.
say, it was always a struggle that they came over. It's the hero's journey, right? But
Yes. Yes.
for so long, I was hearing women in particular speak about something that they'd overcome.
Mhm.
This is what they struggled through, and this is what they came through. And it became a little bit for me depressing. I said, I don't want to hear another like recovery stories, something like that, right? Uh,
Yeah.
like for motivation, it was no longer motivating me, right?
Mhm.
I don't know why. Maybe it was just so many stories like that. It always opened with, um, motivation story like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, the other thing I was thinking about was because these stories sometimes come from our many years at work or in a corporate setting, like you said, it's about some of the metrics and what the corporation was expecting and how you achieve that and things like that. That's on the resume, right? That's
Mhm.
what people are looking for. But what about those women who say, my story, other than that, is not that interesting, or everybody in my field has a similar experience like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Say something to that.
Absolutely. You know what I love about this is people often feel as if the thing about what they've experienced from their past isn't as interesting, right? I was dealing with a particular client that is a scientist, and she was is creating this really cool app, and she was telling me that some of the struggles that she had when she was pitching these apps, because it was very like scientific. I mean, it's really incredible, like what it's going to do, right?
Hmm.
And then I just asked her, like, "But why did you decide to create this app?" And then she gave me this broken, like this very like presentation of like why it's good. I said, "Well, let's go back. Okay, so let's go back into like why you became fascinated with science, right?"
Hmm. Hmm.
And then she mentioned, I'm not a Star Trek fan, so if I'm getting these characters wrong, but but she talked about this character in Star Trek that was able just to always transform. And I'm like, well, that's it. Like you've always from a young child being fascinated by the idea of transforming, right? And so we sort of use the story again. She didn't think that was a big deal, but people are interested about the journey. Like what's that really unique thing that makes you you you? And I think that oftentimes, because again, we're so accustomed to these big shiny presentations of like who we are and our accomplishments.
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
think of the simple thing about what makes you you. What are things about you that's been consistent throughout your life that makes you who you are? And it starts off with the most simplest story.
Hmm. When I work with women entrepreneurs and they're doing a pitch, that's not my area of expertise. But
Yeah.
when I do just sort of do a review of their slide deck or something like that, yeah, that's what's missing is the real deep, authentic story, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would imagine it's more work than we figure it is, right? It's not just
Oh,
a matter of sitting down for a couple of hours and filling out a sheet. What's my my story. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this does lead into our next topic, and that is talking about reframing our life experiences into our legacy brand. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, legacy brand, correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't necessarily mean when we're finished everything, this is our legacy.
Mhm,
But it's
mhm.
something that's going to follow us into our next chapter. This is our legacy continuing, right?
Yeah.
So, tell me about the legacy brand. I'd love the concept because our listeners aren't just looking for their next job.
Right.
They're looking to create something meaningful that leverages everything that they've learned, like you said. Can you explain what a legacy brand looks like?
Yeah, so everything I do is the story shift. It's like a guided
Mhm.
framework that I use to help women sort of at the threshold of reinvention,
Mhm.
right? And not, so what I do is I help them sort of reframe their lived experience,
Mhm.
not as baggage, but we're sort of building the blocks of legacy,
I
right?
love that distinction, by the way, not as
Yeah,
baggage,
yeah.
building
Thank you.
blocks. Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's
so
great.
so so my method breakdown is like in three, like, we do reflection, we
Mhm.
do reclamation, and we do resonance, right? And so with the reflection is we sort of unpack some like outdated roles and narratives, right? And I don't try to stay too long on the reflection part, but the goal is to be very present about like where you are now and where you're trying to go next. But we do try to use the things like what are the story that's holding you back? What's a story that you consider a baggage, right? And so how do we use that to reclaim it? All right. So the next is the reclamation, right? You're taking something back, something that was lost, something that was taken, something that was damaged or forgotten. And we're saying, nope, that's mine. I'm claiming it again, right?
Hmm.
And then the final step is like the resonance, like, resonance is moving in alignment with your true voice,
Mhm.
right? Not just with your voice, but with like your actions, like your
Yeah,
words,
yeah.
and all the energy of like matching who you really are.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Could you share a common pattern that you see how successful executives initially frame their experiences versus how they learn to reframe? Now, you did mention from baggage to building block, but is there something that you see come up quite often with women executives?
Yeah, I think the consistent pattern is constantly editing themselves, right? And so what often happens is when they're telling me a story um or anything about like what they're experiencing, I find them like self-editing. Well, actually, no, I'm trying to do it's constant. It's like let's not self-edit at this stage. Let's just sit with what you
Mhm.
are feeling and what you're saying. But this constant need to self-edit, and I think that is probably, and we eventually work through that, but that is almost every session I've had is someone constantly self-editing themselves. And I want to tell them this is a safe space. This is not a moment for me to judge you. And I get it because again, like when you are in a workplace in certain spaces, you have been conditioned to be like, well, I have to act a certain way, or someone has to see me in this certain way, right?
Mhm,
And so the
mhm,
goal is to no longer do that, right? And to live in your truth wherever you are.
mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. I'll have to monitor my own self-editing.
We all do it. Listen, I catch myself too, but I'm glad I have this
You know,
self-awareness now to
yeah.
like check, like, no, this is who I am. Sometimes it's a bit messy, and now I'm owning the messy, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
I imagine this reframing process can bring up some vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Many of our listeners have experienced setbacks, career pivots, and moments where they questioned their path. I can tell you, for one, those women who are returning to work during and after cancer treatment,
Mm.
yes, it's a setback, it's a derailment. Sometimes they do have to pivot. So, how do you help women incorporate those challenges into their legacy brand in a way that adds strength, like building rather than bringing it along as baggage?
Here's the thing. What I always want to own and acknowledge is that this is very hard.
Hmm.
I always let them know, like, this is not this easy thing at a snap of a finger. You're just going to feel great about, unpacking these things that are very hurtful
Mm-hmm.
in your life. So I always want to acknowledge that this is hard. This can be painful. I mean, listen, there's a reason why you put things in the back, right? There's a reason why you want to forget something. There's a reason why you don't want to reclaim it because it is painful, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I always remind them that by reclaiming it, it's not that you're no longer feel the pain again, but you're going to address it because the
Mm-hmm.
reality is it's still in you, but you've kind of mastered this idea of masking it, all right, or putting walls of
Mm-hmm.
where it exists. So I always want to acknowledge to anyone going through this transition in their life when they're in this new threshold is that this is hard, it's going to be hurtful, but I am there with you. And so my goal is to let you know that you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
And so I'm here as a guide to help you.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm. So that leads into our final topic today, and that is authenticity and emotional connections, right? So, um, what is the role of authenticity in building the emotional connections for your clients?
Hmm. You hear authenticity a lot now, right? It's like, and I don't really see it as this like buzzword. Um, I always think about, you know, when someone's being authentic, right? Like you feel it, right? And you know it in yourself too. Like when you're putting performance, and um, when you're actually operating at your truest self. So I'm always very mindful of that. It's one thing to talk the talk, but are you walking it, right? And this is,
Yeah.
I'm being very cliche right now, but
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. Because again, like there's oftentimes, especially when you're in a workplace, there's these mission statements and these values and all of these things. And then you're looking around and like, well, are we aligning with this mission statement that you have posted on the wall? So it goes the same with yourself. I mean, if you are claiming that you are this way, right, then how are your actions aligning with that? And so listen, my clients aren't just looking for more visibility. They want visibility that feels like them. And
Mm-hmm.
that is truly when you're moving. Listen, there's a huge difference when you are moving in a place in your truest self, your truest, like you start enjoying yourself a bit more.
Yeah. 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 It's feeling comfortable in your skin, isn't it? Like it.
100%.
Yeah, because I agree with you that authenticities, unfortunately, when words like that were sometimes powerful,
Yeah.
I'm not a linguist, but when they're powerful and then we overuse them, then that's when the cliches come out, right?
Yeah.
But you've just described something that, that you're enjoying yourself, you're comfortable with yourself. So maybe that is what authenticity is. How we show up in the world. If we're comfortable with how we're showing up in the world, then
Yeah.
we'll know we're being authentic rather than talking the talk and not being, the other word is alignment, not being aligned with who you say you are. And that can create so much discomfort for a person, right? So
100%. And
it,
here's the thing, I just want to add this thing about, like, you can't be authentic if you are holding if there's something about what you've experienced that you feel shame of saying, right? Even
Mhm,
saying to yourself and claiming it. So in
mhm,
order to live as authentic, you got to hold all those truths. Like there's multiple truths about who you are, what you've experienced, and you have to hold them all together.
mhm.
It's not picking and choosing the one that looks really, really good on paper.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. It sounds a little uncomfortable because it might be the need for confession to yourself
Yeah.
or sharing it with someone else. And I think we
Mhm.
all have things in our lives that we're not that comfortable sharing with other people.
Yeah.
So, would you say that is more like having compassion for ourselves and recognizing that the something did happen and therefore not carry it as baggage? Like,
100%. 100%.
yeah,
I always see people, you are not the worst thing that you did.
that makes me feel better.
You're not. We are complex we are complex beings. We have experienced there's multiple truths about who we are. Sometimes they even contradict ourselves, right?
Yes, for
But
sure.
you know, so I always let people know, like, but again, like, so when you don't identify and you're saying, well, that's not, but that's still part of your story. But that doesn't reveal who you are, your full essence, right? So you can say, yeah, I did this thing, but I also did this thing, right? I also experienced that, but I also experienced that. And so
Yeah.
when you're holding all of that, no one can throw anything at you.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that I'll be like, yeah, that is true. However, this is also true too. You know,
And hopefully we can evolve with those
100%.
truths. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
many of our listeners feel a tension between our professional and our personal. So because that is part of or has been part of our act is to show up professionally, right? So
yeah,
sometimes there's well, often there's a conflict there,
yeah.
especially for women who've spent years in corporate environments. How do you help women find that sweet spot where they can be, and I'll use the word authentic. No, let's not
Yeah.
use authentic. Let's say
Okay.
comfortable in their skin, comfortable with themselves while they're still commanding respect and authority.
100%. I always think about making sure that you're aligning with your character, right? And so, what always leads, we all have a different thing that sort of is like we always use to make sure that we are staying true to who we are, right? And so, one thing about me is my integrity, right? And so,
Fair
no
value.
matter where I am, I'm going to move in integrity, right?
Mhm.
And so, if I'm in my workplace and someone's asking me something that interferes with my integrity, I'm not going to do that, right? And I'm going to be very vocal about that,
Yeah.
because again, I have to live with myself. And I
Hmm.
have enough trust in myself that what I do, I've already shown what I can do in the workplace, right?
Hmm.
Like, yes, I have these words of being a Telly Award-winning producer, but again, like that's a title, but like I've already proven in my workplace that I'm capable of doing my job, right? But
Hmm.
again, that would never interfere with my character, like who I
Hmm.
am at my core. So no matter where I am, my integrity is with me. It's with me in my home, at work, at the grocery store, you know, that stays with me. So I always make sure, like, what is it about you? My aunt, my Aunt Angela had this fantastic thing, which I'm going to butcher it because she's obviously a genius and a poet. But something about you that is clean, right?
Hmm.
Something that's so untainted that you keep with you no matter where you are. If someone crosses that line, you're like, no, not
Hmm.
here. And
Hmm.
so there's always something about me, my integrity that is clean. And no matter where I am, that is going to stay with me. So I always remind my clients of like, yes, I understand that you have to, there's certain things that you'll say at a workplace that you wouldn't say at home, but also making sure like your character is
Yeah.
very true and consistent.
Strong character.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because, in different circumstances, you are going to be put in a position where it's testing your integrity or
100%.
testing your honesty or
Yeah,
testing your ability to um, be fair or communicate in a fair way and things like that. You're going to come across those. So that's some of the strong foundation that we have to build for ourselves and recognize that so that we don't step over it unintentionally and then feel really bad about ourselves afterwards, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, I was gonna say sometimes it does require hard conversations.
Hmm.
And then in a day that you will come home to yourself feeling as if like I'm staying true to myself and not what people expected of me.
Yes, that's a
Yeah.
nice way to fall asleep at night. Have a good
Yeah.
night's sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you share an example of how you've seen someone transform their ability to connect by embracing more authenticity in the story telling?
Oh my goodness. There's so many examples, but I'll talk maybe to a recent client of mine that is now an empty nester. And two of her children are now, in college and entering the professional world.
Hmm.
And her whole identity has always been about being a mom, and that's a lot of mothers that can relate to that.
Yeah.
And we sort of went back into the things that she always wanted to do was to write, you know. I had a great friend that told me, Eritrea, writers write. So sometimes you'll meet people say, I'm a writer, but they're not really writing, right?
Yeah.
um, and so so she started so we I gave her sort of this breakdown of this program for her to start writing, like just having the commitment, because sometimes in writing you can set time aside and you're not really getting things done, right? Or nothing's really coming out, but just starting a structured time of writing just for herself, right? And we did
Mhm.
that consistently. And she told me, like, it became this pattern when then she actually started to really see herself as a writer, because she was like continuously doing that. So now she has a new role where she calls herself a writer now, you know? So
Sure.
she's also a mother, but she's also a writer now. So I love those very simple stories of people that are very accustomed to being one particular way. And sometimes it's serving you at a certain point in your life. She had to be a mother, right? But
Yeah.
now that her kids are now doing their own things and living their own lives, and she realized, like, I need something a bit more that's just for me. And so those are something that that's pretty consistent with a lot of my clients, but that's a pretty fresh one that was fresh on my mind.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, Eritrea, this has been incredibly valuable. You've really dug deep into to my mind. I'm thinking of things about my story. Before we wrap up, what would you want every woman listening to remember about the power of their story?
Mm, you know, the one thing, if I could tell any woman watching this, is that your next chapter, it doesn't require you to become someone new. It just requires you to reclaim the voice you already have, right? And so I always tell them to, like, that you don't need to find a voice. It was never lost. You don't need to perform harder. You just need to reconnect with the women beneath the roles and let her lead the encore.
Wow, that's interesting. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
'cause we talk so much about reinvention, right? So
yeah.
it's you've got a little bit of a twist on that. It's not about reinvention, it's about claiming who you already
It's
are,
already there. Yeah.
polish it up a bit to your liking, right? That's
Thank
beautiful.
thank
Uh,
you.
where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about the Story Shift, your program?
Absolutely. You all can follow me on Instagram under Story Maestra. I'm also on LinkedIn under my full name, Eritrea Pitts. You can find me there. You can send me a DM.
Mhm.
And so between those two, I'll definitely be able to connect with you.
Okay. So some of those links are those who are watching on YouTube, they will be able to get those links by watching YouTube. But yes, we will make sure all those links are in the show notes. To everyone listening, I want you to remember three key takeaways from today's conversation. This is what I've been thinking about. And that is, first, your story isn't just what happened to you, it's how you choose to frame it and how you choose to share those experiences to create a connection and to influence people. I think that's the influencing part. We need to think about that a little more, how we're showing up in the outside world and how that does influence. The second is every challenge, every pivot, every triumph in your career or your life becomes part of a powerful legacy, your legacy brand that can open doors to what's next. Doesn't necessarily mean another job, but there are so many other opportunities out there for women who are in their encore phase. And finally, authenticity, although it's a buzzword, it isn't about a weakness in professional settings. It's actually your greatest strength for building the meaningful relationships that fuel your chapter. Your decades of experience have given you the story worth telling. You just have to reclaim it or claim it. The question isn't whether you have something valuable to share, it's whether you are ready to claim the actual power of your story. So, today's episode, if it inspired you, here's what you can do right now. First, subscribe to Executive Encore. You'll see up in the corner there is a code where you can get your camera out and join there. It'll also be in the notes, okay? And join Executive Encore wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode designed specifically for women at this stage or any woman going through that. Oh, good. Okay, that one went away. Okay. Second, I'd love to hear how today's conversation landed with you. Leave us a comment, and any comments that you leave, Eritrea and I will answer you. We'll acknowledge you. This is your story, so we're going to acknowledge your story as well. Tag us at Executive Encore and tell us what part of the story you're ready to reclaim. Uh, Consider your privacy, though, okay? Finally, join our growing community of remarkable women by following us on LinkedIn, and where we will share weekly inspiration and practical tools for your next chapter. Remember, your experience has prepared you for something extraordinary. Your story will bridge between where you've been and where you're going. So until next time, I'm going to ask Eritrea one more question. When did you realize that your story was so important to you?
I know we don't have much time, but what I will say is it was an interesting moment when I was in transition to a job, right? And I was working
Ah,
as a journalist. And I remember the show that I worked for got canceled, but we're thinking about next steps. And I remember I said, I want to pursue comedy, which
oh,
was not the most logical thing, but it was something that I generally wanted to do. And that was the beginning of like really truly listening to my voice, because that voice, you're gonna have multiple encore moments in your life. I firmly believe that. But that the voice that I return to in any kind of pivot that I am experiencing in my life. So that was probably the beginning of what led me to where I am at this moment.
oh,
So
that's lovely, returning to that
yeah.
time.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll be able to read more for our listeners. You'll be able to read more in the Sunday Encore newsletter, where I will be featuring Eritrea this week, Sunday, August 31st. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please subscribe now so that you don't miss that. Will also be in this week's blog, but there'll be something extra special in the newsletter because Eritrea has an offer for VIP members. Eritrea, you do have an offer today, a call to action for a tool that you have, right?
Yes, it's called the Story Shift Framework. So I am providing that for them to use. And it would just be a first mini guide to sort of start this journey of sort of reclaiming your story.
Mm-hmm. And then through the newsletter, you'll get an extra offer. Okay, so please subscribe. Okay, remember, your story matters. This is where your Executive Encore story begins, or it does not end, that's for sure. This is where you get to start to live, work, and lead differently with a healthy mindset and self trust, as I always explain. Till next time, take care of yourself, do what's best for you, and don't jeopardize what you've built for yourself.
Amen. All right.